All right, all right. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Rise and shine from all around the world. Everybody in the States. I'm sure we all are really nervous just to see what's going to happen with the politics and the final results with our president. But let's not talk about politics. Let's talk about rum. Um, well, first of all, once again, thank you everybody to joining us here today. We have really quickly uh, everybody who's new, or if you're new to our platform on Savvy, to your right, you're going to see a chat box. Make sure to write any comment. I already see a lot of activity. John, good to see you. Will, awesome to be in here. Justin as well. Nice to, I don't know if we met before, but great that I've seen a lot of activity already. If you have any questions during the event, make sure to share them below where it says ask questions. Today's agenda is going to be 30-40 minutes talking about main presentation, which this is a small distillery tour. And plus, we'll learn more about the brand. 1 or 2 minutes sharing some contact information. And then if there's any questions, we'll go to our rum o'clock Q&A. Really quickly on today's today's topic is 3 of Strong Distillery Tour. Plus special interviews. Our main guest is Graham Hamlet. He is the master distiller of 3 of Strong spirits. And actually, yesterday through the Rum Lab, we had him as our main guest. I want to share this really quickly so everybody can see what a good interview he did. So if you go to the Rum Lab, click on the interview. So I was talking with Graham. I'm like, Graham, you better make sure to keep that laugh throughout the whole presentation. It's important. But this is something interesting. Usually people respond to like 10 questions. Graham is like, he took it very serious. He went through all the questions and talked a lot in depth, which is great. It's actually, we really appreciate that a lot. But there's a lot of cool stories here about Graham. But why not bring him on board, right? And actually, there's more guests. We also have Sam and Dave, which are the co-founders of the distillery as well, and the brand. Hello, hello.
Hey.
Hello. So depending on your screen, my screen, the way it looks is that you have to your right corner, you have Graham. Of course, the name is there. And then to your upper right, then you have Sam, and then below me we got Dave. So let's really quickly the most important person right now. Well, everybody's important, but a very important person right now is Graham because he's the one who came out on the Rum Lab as the interview of the week. Graham, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? I'm gonna change the screens a little bit so you look bigger. I might look bigger for a second, but we have to change that. I am not the star here. There we go. And I don't want people to see my pimples. I'm going to try to hide them.
There we go. Now I'm big. Yeah, so a little bit about myself. Thanks for having us on. This is a fun time always, and it's great to be part of the rum community for sure. But yeah, a little bit about myself. As you said, I'm the distiller here. I've been distilling now for just about 20 years, if not a little bit longer. I got my start in the alcohol business about 23 years ago, something like that. I try not to keep track. I started a job at a small boutique vineyard and winery in New Hampshire, which is where I was born and raised. Stayed over from Maine here. And there I kind of learned, I got my foot in the door. I have a history in horticulture, so I started tending to the grapes. That evolved into working into the cellars and learning some of the fermentation. And then ultimately taking over the winemaking. And then that kind of evolved into distilling on a small scale. We started on a little 25-gallon pot still there at the winery, distilling some extra wine, some questionable quality wine too, I'll say at the time. But we were just making brandy to fortify a port wine. But that was enough to kind of get me bit by the distilling bug. Fast forward a couple years, around 2004, still at the same winery. We purchased a German still from Christian Karl that allowed us to dive into things like vodka, gin, brandy, rum, whiskey. And I was there for about 15 years learning the art and craft of fermentation and distillation. And then after about those 15 years, I had an opportunity to go to a well-known brewery down in Delaware that was distilling on a small scale. So I went down there to help them kind of ramp up their distilling program, do some recipe development, and kind of just really start putting them on the map as well as far as spirits go. But being from the Northeast here, my wife and I long to get back to where our families and friends are. So through a mutual friend, I got introduced to Sam and Dave. Right around the same time, my wife and I were trying to figure out a plan to get back to the Northeast. And it just so happened these guys were starting a rum distillery. So it worked out timing-wise, was great. And after talking with them, they had a very cool approach to how they wanted to make rum and the approach to it. Keeping everything as natural as possible, making rums without artificial colors or sweeteners, so things that I kind of held true to myself. And that was, the rest they say is sort of modern history at this point. So the distillery here at 3 of Strong has been up and running for just almost a year and a half. So we're still fairly new in the whole rum game, but within those almost year and a half, we've been able to do a lineup of about 7 different rums, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a second. But I kind of wanted to kind of start the process of where everything starts with spirit production is the raw ingredients.
Absolutely. Well, before we start talking about the whole the company, or before we deep dive and going through the ingredients and going through doing the distillery tour, I saw Sam trying to raise his hand a little bit slightly. Kind of he looked shy, but I know he wanted to talk. So I want to let Dave and Sam to talk a little bit more about about the company itself. So 3 of Strong, where does that name come from? What's the idea of creating the distillery? And what was your background in the booze industry?
Yeah, so maybe I'll jump in because I interrupt all the time. So this is Dave, but I'll start with kind of the dream, and then maybe Sam can talk about how we made the dream a reality. So I came with the crazy idea. Sam put it together so that it worked. So 3 of Strong, I'll say to begin with, Sam and I have been friends for a really long time. And my background, as a kid, I worked in hospitality as a bartender. But I've been a food and beverage lawyer and intellectual property lawyer for the past 25 years or so, working a lot with craft breweries, mostly. But the thing I always loved was spirits, and more particularly rum. And I'm kind of a history geek, as Sam is, and Portland, Maine, which is where we are, has a long and rich history in rum making, which surprises a lot of people when you tell them that, but it's true. So that was kind of cool. But the bottom line is I just love rum, and so does Sam. So that's kind of how we hatched the scheme. Really had. Wasn't so much a master plan to dominate the world as it was to just make something that we really, really loved, and build a business here in Maine. And our wives pointed out early on that we knew how to drink rum, we didn't know how to make it. So that's where Graham came into the picture, and he really is. Sam and I are really just the opening bands here, so we'll keep it brief. So just the name 3 of Strong comes from an old rum punch or an old punch recipe. So it's proportions basically. 1 of sour, 2 of sweet, 3 of strong, and 4 of weak. So the sour being lime or lemon juice, usually sweet being sugar. The strong proportion would inevitably have been rum around here, and the weak would be water or ice. So that we took that name both as a call out to the history piece, Fede, but also because it speaks to gathering people around the punch bowl. So sort of the community piece of it. And you can see in one of those pictures there of one of our, this is pre-COVID times, we wear masks, we stand apart now, but back in the day, that was for the release of our, I think our Merry Meeting spiced rum. And we had a big old party. And that's very much the vibe that we're about. And that part of the community, the joy, and the fact that we're in Maine, that sense of place is really important to the dream that we had, and about also how we convey that in the world. So for example, and you'll see, Sam, Graham, and I, we've got our logo kind of everywhere, which is this sort of mountains and trees logo. And it was important to us to convey the idea of not just lobsters and lighthouses for Maine, right? Maine is this huge, amazing state with a lot of natural beauty. And we wanted to speak to that. Maine people are also really, for the most part, honest, open. What you see is what you get. So Graham's going to talk about the fact that we use, real ingredients and natural ingredients. So we don't, there's nothing wrong with dosing your rum with some sugar, but for us, we wanted it to be really important that what we were, that we weren't covering up what we were doing, I'll say.
Transparency.
Transparency, huge piece of it. And so that we try to convey that through all of our branding. Our bottles, I don't know if you can bring up the picture, Fede, of the bottle lineup. So you can tell each one has its own story. Each one, is a distinct label, a distinct bottle, but they're all part of the same brand family. And we tried to convey that idea of Maine and what we're about kind of through the whole family. And I'll be quiet now.
So, really quickly, when we talk about history, if I'm not mistaken, between Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Maine were one of the first states that had the colonization, or the 13 colonies that had a distillery.
Yeah, I think actually Staten Island was the very first place that had a rum distillery in the U.S., but there were literally hundreds of rum distilleries from, concentrated mostly in New England in those years. And in fact, in Portland, where we are, in 1850, this was a town of back then about 10,000 people. There were 20 distilleries that were solely devoted to producing rum. Wow. So people made and drank a hell of a lot of rum up here.
Well, just at those times, it was safer to drink alcohol than to drink water, right? So that was one of the reasons. And are any artifacts available, like of all distilleries that were here, that were there at some point? Anything has been able to be salvaged?
Not really. There have been a couple of devastating fires in Portland over the years. And so there are very few buildings that are standing from before the most recent of those fires, which was in, I think, 1866, I want to say. So there's not, it would have been really cool if we could have like gone into some, original old distillery space. We're in a cool space, but, and it's a warehouse space, and Sam can tell you about how we did that. But yeah, no, most of the original stuff that was here is gone.
There is actually one historical piece that's fun. When we were talking about this sort of ties in pretty well. When we were talking about this idea, I was telling my family members about it, and my favorite part was my mom thought the whole idea was a hoot. So that was interesting feedback. But one of the really interesting things I found out is that I actually have an ancestor in the 1750s who was a rum runner out of Charlestown, Massachusetts. And actually on the Charles River had a distillery. And my brother, who's a little bit of a historian, pulled up an old bill of lading for orders of rum punch to get the crew signed on and drunk enough to actually be pressed into service. So it was a very interesting fact to get a little bit of history there. And we did a lot of research when we started out this process. I think, ironically, Dave and I sat down. He asked me to lunch on April Fool's Day in 2019 and asked if I wanted to, have some rum. And I thought that was an invitation to day drinking, which was really exciting. But no, it was actually do you want to take our shared passion for rum and actually create something? And, it was a really interesting concept, but I think we were excited to try and do it in a way that was sustainable as a business. And we had a lot of, we spent a lot of time, like 18 months, basically talking about ideas, concepts, ways to go forward with it. And in true entrepreneurial fashion, you'll be surprised to know that we didn't have in our plans a global pandemic as part of our first 15 months.
I don't believe that. I think everybody had it on their books.
You try and be thorough in your research, and that really is. But we've actually, we are not yet at the point where we've had more months in service with COVID than without, but we're getting close. But it's been a very interesting thing. We had our plans. We had one of the first reasons we realized with our great plans, people told us, "Oh, you guys can, figure out distilling, on your own." And then when we were starting the build out of the space, which was really coming from a straight warehouse with no equipment at all, we started getting technical questions from the engineers about the equipment we were going to use. At which point we realized how foolish it was that we might actually try and build it out ourselves. And we were very fortunate to find Graham and to get his expertise so that we didn't buy the wrong things or put them in the wrong place or put a floor plan together that made no sense. As he walks you through, you'll see the fruits of his labor for coming through something that really the entire workflow is designed from scratch of where ingredients are coming in the door and where the bottles are going out. So it's really been a good opportunity to do that. But it has been very interesting to constantly be evolving as we go. And despite all that, to have 7 spirits, our first 6 rums, and our first gin, to have those all done in the first 15 months, we're really happy to have filled out that portfolio. And obviously, with all that's happened, there's a long way to go. But if nothing else, I think we've proven the sort of entrepreneurial spirit and the and the classic rum runner type of approach of, well, if I can't do it this way, I'm going to do it another way. So it's been really good to put those pieces together, and then to have Graham produce the spirits that he has and in our location, we're really proud of, and I look forward to having him walk you through everything.
Yeah, because in the end, at the end of the day, you can have the best marketing in the world and the slickest packaging, but if what's in the bottle isn't any good, you're not going to sell more than the one bottle to someone.